In this video I'm just going to give you an introduction to my project car. I've been working on this car on and off for around 2 years now. It's just come back from the body shop where it's had the roof changed. It did have a sunroof on previously, so I've changed the roof panel. I've also had it resprayed in ruby stone. As you can see, it's not been a full bare metal respray. So certain parts of the car which are not easily accessible still got the original blue paint on them, but all of these parts will all be covered up when the car is finished. I intend to do some more videos on this car as I go along now to chart my future progress, but I'm just going to give you a quick rundown on the various jobs I've done on the car already. So I'll start off around the interior and then I'll go on to the outside and then underneath the car. So as you can see in the interior at the moment, all of the main parts of the interior have been stripped out, including some of the sound deadening at the back. My plan is to probably cover this area with some soundproofing matte and then maybe cover it in Alcantara. I'm not sure yet. The side panels along here and the sound deadening have all been removed from there. Those will be retrimmed with Alcantara panels, which I've got now. It's had a bolted cage fitted in on the back. It's safety devices cage, complete with the harness bars, and it also contains the front part as well, as you can see there, which is removable, so I will be able to remove that for use on the road if required. The dashboard is currently out. That's been retrimmed in Alcantara. Whilst the dashboard has been out, there have been a few minor mods done to the wiring, which you can't really see on there. But basically I've changed the wiring so that it can control a solenoid for the third radiator in the front. So other than that, there's been a tracker fitted on there so that I can disable the car remotely if required and monitor the position of the car. And then the interior is going to be refitted with some black carpet, also with black GT3 rear carpet, and as I say, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do in the trim on the back yet, but it'll be a combination of carpet and Alcantara. Whilst it's been off, the rear wiper system has been deleted, so there's been a rear wiper delete fitted on there, as you can see. Also in the back, the engine is currently out. So whilst the engine has been out, the interior area all around there has been painted in body colour as well, and all of the area under here has all been cleaned up and has all been undersealed with some Dinatrol wax protection. So whilst the engine's out, engine's over here, there have been a few minor jobs done on the engine. One of these is fitting the solenoid for the switchable exhaust. This usually connects to a vacuum tank which would sit here, but I've teed it into the original vacuum tank, which sits, if you can see it, around here on the engine. That's this tank here. So that's been fitted. I've also cleaned up various elements of it. I've removed the power steering pump, so I'm going to go to an electric power steering pump. This engine did originally have the X51 oil system on it, so it has the second return pipe here. This returns oil from this end of the head back to here, where it goes into a two-stage pump. We're having a new pump made up for that, so that will be fitted soon. There'll be a video explaining that in the near future. The electric pump that's going to be fitted is this one here. It's a Vauxhall pump. That's going to be fitted into the front, so it's going in here somewhere. Not quite sure yet exactly where it's going to fit, but be somewhere in there. So starting around the front of the car on the outside, the master cylinder has been changed. It's now running a 27mm master cylinder, which involved having to make a new pipe up for it, which is this pipe on here. The battery has been changed. Instead of using the very large battery, it's now running a much smaller battery, so it saves quite a few kilos in weight. This has had the bottom bracket modified so that the battery bolts down with a clamp onto there. And then also in here I'm going to make up a strut brace which will go across, picking up on the 3 bolts on here across to the other side. It's not so much for extra strength that's required across the front, but it's more so that the canisters for the suspension have got somewhere to bolt to so that they look a bit neater. On top here, this hole had to be enlarged here. This was so that I could get the fittings through for the suspension and so that I can get at the adjustment points for the top mount. So as you can see at the moment, the screen's out, all the wiper mechanism and everything are all out, but they've all been cleaned up and they're ready to go back in. So moving on to the suspension and brakes. So here are the front brakes. These brakes are modified KN turbo calipers. It's all a bit dusty around here from where it's been in the body shop, so that needs a bit of a clean. So these are modified KN turbo calipers with adapters on here. And the suspension, you can see running the RSS adjustable bottom arms. It's running those all round with fully adjustable links on everything. Running the turret adjustable anti-roll bar. One thing I do need to do for this though is I need to get some pickups made to go onto here. It's supposed to pick up for the drop link from here on the suspension, but it doesn't work very well. There's not really enough movement on these joints here for it to work to my liking. So I'm going to make a pickup similar to the rear, which will bolt onto here. So I'll show you that when we get around to the back of the car. Other than that, around here, it's just all been cleaned up and undersealed. It's had new brake pipe. These front pipes, they can corrode, so that pipe's been replaced. Moving on to the front, around the radiator, it's had a new radiators fitted on both sides, along with new piping. I've also fitted the 3rd radiator kit, so there's a take-off on here on this side to go to the radiator, and here you can see the front radiator here. This is using the GT2 vented top, so the air vents upwards out the bonnet, out above the bonnet. So I've had to make up some brackets to move that further forwards. And another detail on here, you see through here there's a solenoid fitted onto there. So what that's doing, that's controlling the flow to the 3rd radiator, so the system can monitor the temperature of the water or the coolant returning to the engine and only turn the centre radiator on when needed. Also on the air conditioning, I'm only going to run a single condenser, so the one on this side has been modified just to be a simple loop, so it's easy to add the other condenser if required, but otherwise I'll just be running the one. Then moving on to this side, so here we have the radiator and the condenser, which are new, and then there's been a slight modification required to the return pipe for the radiator. The radiators had to be mounted upside down for the centre one to get it to fit properly with it tilting forwards, and there you can see a bracket which has had to be made up with the 90-degree fitting on the coolant pipe. Everything else around the front there all remains as standard. So as you can see, the wings are off at the moment. They're going to be painted separately along with the bonnet. It's having a fiberglass bonnet fitted. So moving on to the interior around here, there have been some minor mods done around the fuse box area, which you might not be able to tell there. There's a timer relay in there, which is for timing the solenoid for the centre radiator. I've also cleaned up a lot of the wiring. There'd been some previous tracker device fitted around here under the seat, which has come out. The wiring for that was a mess, so that's all been cleaned up. I'll also be changing the gear shift cables, so at the moment it's got the standard cables. I've got some cup cables to go in. So moving down to the rear suspension, the rear calipers are 996 turbo calipers to use the wider discs, so it's running 350mm discs all round, and those are running with a 10mm spacer in there to space it off the uprights. Again, on the rear suspension, RSS bottom arms, all fully adjustable rose jointed suspension. The rear anti-roll bar link. You can see there picking up off the suspension from the bottom of the shock absorber. So I'll be doing a similar setup to that on the front of the car. So that's a brief view around the outside and the inside. I'll just get the car lifted up into the air and I'll be able to show you around on the underneath. There's not so much to see underneath here. You can see from here I've removed the front differential. This was originally a C4. I wanted to use a C4 because it's basically the same chassis as used on the GT3. I've removed the front differential and the prop shaft. I've also changed the uprights to use the Carrera 2 uprights so that I can use the more straightforward suspension geometry where the suspension doesn't have to try to avoid the front drive shaft. So you can see under here all the new joints. The front subframe's been off, cleaned up, repainted, and all of the underneath has been cleaned up and treated to some Dinatrol under seal protection. So you'll see at the rear end, the rear subframes have been off and treated in the same way. Whilst under here, I've also replaced the rear brake pipe. This pipe here, this one is the one that tends to go rotten. It runs from one side of the car to the other. And as you can see from the location of it, it's very difficult to change with the engine and gearbox in place because it basically runs over the top of the gearbox. So that's all been replaced. And I shall be removing the power steering hoses, which are these two, the top two there, which run round there as I'll be moving to the electric one. Whilst the rear subframes have been off, the rubber fixings for it have been removed and replaced with the solid mounts on there. This moves the rear subframe up by around ½ an inch, which gives it the same geometry as the GT3. So other than that, on the rear end, it's just been a case of cleaning everything up, undersealing it, protecting it where needed, and getting it ready for the refitting of the engine. So when I come to refit the engine, I will be taking off the rear subframes again. It's just easier to fit the engine and gearbox with those drop down. So I'll drop those off. You can get a better view of the rear suspension. So the rear anti-roll bar is off at the moment. So I had to come off to get the engine and gearbox out. Again, underneath the rear arches, you can just see it's all just been cleaned up, protected. There was some minor welding done around the areas of the rear arch, both sides. And one of the next jobs I'll be doing is to inject wax into the sills. So if you can see in there, there's light surface rust in there. So these are going to be injected with penetrating wax to further protect those. And with that done, the main parts of the body shell should be done. And then I can continue with refitting the interior and getting the engine and gearbox ready to go back in.